All right. Well, Brett, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate being here, guys.
Tobe Johnson, welcome to the show for the first time. We appreciate you being here.
Brian Todd, hello.
I hope you guys are doing well. Brett, we know we're talking to you out of the Pacific Northwest there around Portland area. Tobe, where are you coming from? What's your location?
Also the same, a little farther north up here in a little place called Sequim, Washington, just on the other side of Canada. In fact,
Okay.
on a good day, you can raise at the Canucks and they'll raise a beer back at you.
Right on. So you're definitely in some squatchy territory then.
Man, it's so squatchy up here.
So,
are you outnumbered up there, Tobe? I just had to ask. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I think you're outnumbered by. There's more squatches per capita than humans.
Oh yeah, good point. Yeah, no.
Yeah,
absolutely. I'm always outnumbered. Everywhere I go, I'm uniquely always outnumbered. That is my role in society.
Right. Well, Tobe, give the listeners your background a little bit for us.
Well, let's see here. What did Brett say? I'll go off what he said last time and I'll add to it. So, for me, I grew up in the Pacific Northwest, was born and raised out here. And it just goes without saying that eventually, especially as an only child, kind of raised in front of Bob Barker and late night movies and Elvira After Dark and everything crazy. One of our first memories that Brett and I always get into is Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and looking at that imagery of the character, Richard Dreyfuss's character, Roy Neary, portraying this man obsessed with his own experience. And seeing that impression as a young kid led me to want to pursue other shows like that basically went deeper and farther with these experiencers, right? That said that they had these events happen to them that weren't a part of my everyday Sunday school lesson at all. So that's really where it started as a young man, and I was kind of just left to do it as a latchkey kid. And then, fast forward to 2005 time frame. I'm married at the time, or just getting divorced, actually. Different cryptid. But no, I'm out with my son on the back end of Thurston County in Springfield, Oregon, and we wander into a single track in the mud. And it got this conversation started, whether it was hoax or whether it was the real deal. And I had no previous Bigfoot experience, but yet I'd open up this Pandora's box to the what if factor. And I wanted my son to feel that as well, that sense of mystery. And away we went. After we photographed this track, it just kind of led me down this territory of wanting to meet people that actually looked into this and had experiences. And this was before, there's really podcast. They were just coming out. There was one channel called Talk Shoe, definitely before iTunes. And so much as I could find on little old Talk Shoe with my little broadband connection, dial-up probably, I just started listening to all these. I found Bigfoot shows, and that's where it really started, was in the world of meeting these witnesses and getting to know these witnesses.
Man, you talk like you're as old as we are.
Nah, I think I might. Yeah, well, pushing 50. So.
Are you? Okay, you're close, right?
Yeah, close.
Mm-hmm.
So, Brett, tell us how you know Tobe.
I don't, actually. I've never seen this guy before in my life.
Right.
No,
I am a cryptid.
he is a cryptid. So Tobe and I met through the production of A Flash of Beauty, Bigfoot Revealed. And it kind of came about after Jill, the co-producer on both of these documentaries, and I were watching all these Bigfoot documentaries, on Amazon, just back in 2020. And we watched this one called The Bigfoot Alien Connection, and by Ron Meyer. And
I love that one.
We get to the very end, and here's Tobe and Daryl, and they're like down in Cottage Grove, and I'm looking at Jill, and she's looking at me, and we're like, oh, if we're gonna make this documentary that we were talking about doing at the time, we got to get these guys. We got to talk to these guys. So it wasn't long after that, maybe 3 or 4 weeks, that we found ourselves at Beachfoot. This is right during the pandemic, and there was hardly anybody there. Not the usual 100 or so people at Beachfoot. There's maybe 25 or 30 of us, and Daryl Adams shows up, and we're like, "Hey, it's the guy! It's the guy from with the shed and the stuff and the gifting and all the craziness." And so we got to talking to Daryl, and one thing led to another, and we connected with Tobe, and Tobe really started, pulling some things together for us and connecting us with people. And I mean, he's hugely responsible for us being able to connect with so many great people with so many great stories. And the rest is history. And equally as much, he's been a massive part of our sequel, as a co-producer, as a participant, as an experiencer. So it's been fun, man. And I feel like we're just getting started. I really do.
That's what I was hoping you would
Well,
say.
good. I hope
Yep.
so. Yeah.
Yeah.
So obviously we're talking about A Flash of Beauty, Paranormal Bigfoot, the sequel to A Flash of Beauty, Bigfoot Revealed.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to say, first of all, hands down, you guys kicked ass again and did even better than the first time.
Thank you.
I've watched it 3 or 4 times now. I watched it last night. I know Brian watched it again, or watched it too. Amazing work, guys, and even better than the first one. I will
Thank
say
you.
that.
It was awesome.
Are you going to do another one before we get started on any other questions?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're actually talking about doing a third Flash of Beauty. We've got so many stories and so many experiences and so many different directions that we want to go, that we could go. I mean, the subject matter is endless. Right now, we're working on Voices in the Wilderness. We're adapting Ron Moorhead's book. We're bringing a whole new perspective on the Sierra Sounds and what went on up at Sierra Camp. And as a matter of fact, even next week, I'll be doing a little bit of shooting up in the Sierras while I'm passing through on my way to Arizona. So that's actually the next film. We expect that to come out probably sometime in 2025. We still have a long ways to go, but we've already done some significant interviews, and I can tell you guys that it's going to be amazing. Nobody really knows the full story, and the full story is awesome.
Well, so far, it's pretty darn good, especially the
Thank
end
you.
of the second installment you have there, for sure. So,
Yeah.
Tobe, did they film you?
Did the Sierras just get a bunch of snow?
Yeah, they got, I think it was only like 12 feet or something. I mean,
Only,
people are
right?
like buried.
Right.
Yeah, it's nuts.
Well,
It's nuts.
But be
Yeah.
careful when you go that way.
Yeah, I know. It's just going to be just white walls. We'll just drive through white walls.
Mm-hmm.
Tobe, Brett mentioned you had some experiences when you went. Would you like to tell us about what you've had happen to you?
Sure. Well, when you look into this, you kind of cautiously, optimistically hope that you can have an experience, and you certainly don't want to tick off anybody when you try to have one of these experiences, right? Because they're going to invite you to their area, and you want to make friends. And so I played nice for about, 7 years in the Aper camp, just because that's the first camp that you kind of get involved with, unless you have an initial supernatural encounter with Bigfoot. But in my case, I was seeking kind of like an ambulance chaser, just getting to an area to hear about Bigfoot. And so the Aper camp invited me in, and I thought, well, this is pretty cool, but man, oh man, there seems like this weird paranormal connection to it. So that's when I migrated over to what I would call these Sasquatch contactees, or these people that claim that they have Bigfoot contact multiple times. One of the first guys I ever talked to was a guy by the name of David, who was a river guide. And he was telling me first off out of the gate that he was having multiple encounters. I thought, well, how does that work, dude? And he's just like, well, you'll find out. It's probably too strange for you to hear right now. And I'll be darned. You can have multiple encounters with Bigfoot. And it seems like the way you do it for the most part is you ingratiate their trust in these hotspot locations where they live, i.e. like, probably Bluff Creek would be a hotspot or someplace like that. But the mainstay, the really cool stuff is happening at these people's homes, right? Because now you've got this locked down like research area that seems to kind of have its own control grid to it, right? Because you can lock it in and you know what's been done. You can put all your microphones out and whatnot. And so for me, that would seem like if I could ever find a place where someone would kind of invite me in to live there and research Bigfoot stuff. So that's what I sought out. And that's when the real gamesmanship begins, in in my case with Bigfoot.
So what have you seen one? Have you encountered one? What kind of experiences have you had? Have you
Right. So seeing one for me took about, since 2005 to 2018. So quite a while, right? And I didn't see much of one, but I ended up seeing one from like the knees down behind my Jeep while I was waiting for one to come to town, basically, because we knew that they were coming to town. It's just so extraordinary to try to explain this to anybody who's skeptical about it. But if we look at this as not as a mythical creature or an animal, if we look at this as something that is like a people that are extremely hesitant to get to know other people, it's easier to believe this kind of stuff, right? Because however they do whatever they do as far as where they go when they're not in the forest, because I believe they're not always just in the forest in the flesh. They have these other qualities to them that is reminiscent of the UFO conundrum, right? And so that's how I ended up seeing one, is being patient enough to believe my own words and saying, okay, if we can kind of just hang out and not look for them, not try to trick them, not try to duplicate an experience, not try to screw it up in any way, shape, or form by doing the typical stuff. So we went really atypical. We just left out a lot of recording technology, just like a little Tascam DR05 recorder. And Daryl, my buddy who owned the property at this place that we called the El Moon Lab, was really, he was a recent retiree that had the time and the patience to explore this issue, and basically just hand me the keys to his property and say, okay, if they're here, let's see how crazy this gets.
Cool. Awesome. So Brett, I got to ask you, when did you decide, or when did you know you were going to do the sequel?
We knew really quick, Todd. I think it was about halfway through the production of the first film, Flash of Beauty, Bigfoot Revealed, when we realized that we just had too much stuff, man. We didn't want to cut the quality of the first one by trying to jam everything into 90 minutes, and then, as we kind of progressed into it, we realized that to be fair, we also had to do a second one because of the kind of division, if you will, between the apers and the woo. Our goal is to really put out as good a quality of information as absolutely possible in both films, and even on our YouTube site as well. And let the end user, make up their minds once they've gotten a chance to digest everything that we're putting out there. And so we wanted to be able to do that. We wanted to be able to give each, camp, if you will, its own film to really kind of give it the seriousness that it deserves. We didn't want to manipulate the data. We didn't want to toss something out. Yeah, we heard some pretty out there stories and whatnot, and we've got some pretty out there stories in our film, but we vetted those people. We looked hard at those people, and if there hadn't have been more than one witness, then we probably would have skipped them. But like two guys like Harold and Cody, they both back up their claims, and that's if that would have just happened to Harold, I would have been like, maybe we'll do an interview with him, but I don't know that we put him in the documentary. But the fact that both those guys saw that, or even Rick Taylor and Arla Williams and their experience, that was extraordinary. Same situation. We've got Rick telling his side, and we've got Arla telling her side, and they match up perfectly. He's in California, she's in Oklahoma. So we really want to make sure that, we're really putting together good quality stuff. And I kind of digressed from your question. Sorry, Tom. Oh,
No, that's
we
good.
hear you not.
Yeah, Todd, we can't hear you.
All right, can you hear me
There
now?
you go.
All right, there
We
you
can
go.
hear you.
I got to hit that mute button when I talk, I guess. I'm curious, how do you find these people? How do you come across these experiencers? Some of these are amazing, and I want to talk a little bit about some of these. I don't want to get into too much detail. I want the listeners to go watch it and see it for themselves, because it's an amazing documentary, as I said
It
before.
is.
But how do you find these people? How do you come across these guys?
Man, it's what's so crazy about it, Todd, is that it's almost like they find us. Harold and Cody, for example. So we did a screening down in Bandon, Oregon, where Stan Avery lives from the first film, and we had a bunch of people show up, and we heard a bunch of stories, and every story we heard was great. You know what I mean? And this woman pulled us aside and she said, "Look, my husband did a painting for these two guys, Harold and Cody, and you've got to hear their story. You wouldn't even believe it." And you kind of get to the point where you agree, and you make time to have a phone call and stuff like that, but you never really know what you're gonna hear. I mean, they're always extraordinary, but you don't know to what level. You know what I'm saying? So you kind of go in, like, at this point, I'd say some preconceived ideas, or assumptions, maybe even. But this was obviously different, and so that's how we found them. Arla Williams, when we did our first interview with her in northeastern Oklahoma, she told us this story about this guy that she said, we'll call him Rick. And that story that she told us lingered with me, and she was trying to protect his identity. And so I was reading a book by Christopher Noel about Mindspeak. I think that's the name of the book, is Mindspeak. And I came across that same story, and I was like, this is the guy. This is definitely the guy. And even though Christopher Noel had changed his name and Arla's name, I knew exactly what it was. And so I reached out to Christopher, and I was like, hey, man, could you connect me with this guy? And he did, and we got a hold of Rick, and Rick was like, yeah, I'm all about it. I'm all about doing it. And so we were able to actually go back to Arla's older interview, as she told the story, and then do a new interview with Rick Taylor, and then cut them, weave them together, and corroborate. He had not seen Arla's interview. We weren't going to say, hey, watch Arla's interview and try and match it. You know what I mean?
Right.
We were not going to do that. We just went into the interview, and we said, tell us your story. But as far as some of the other interviews go, and how we found them, like Chad and Austin from the first film, I found them from a Facebook post. And reading the Facebook post, you could tell that these guys were genuinely, like, spooked. Stan Avery, we found at the Beachfoot Gathering. So Todd, I'm not Todd. I'm sorry, Tobe and Daryl from another documentary. You know what I mean? So it's like, I think it really kind of comes down to just having a little bit of a spidey sense as storytellers, to know who is going to work well on camera, and who's got a great story that the audience is really going to be able to sink their teeth into.
I got to say something, though, but Brett is being a little bit modest here. The fact is that there's not been any film out like this about the subject matter, too. And the witnesses have not been given a shot or a chance to talk about Bigfoot in a film like this before. So they are kind of falling all over themselves to get in front of the camera to be a part of this, because this is so different. I mean, actually, there's people that are kind of offended they're not in this documentary, because it is such a riveting tale the way it's told, right? Like, let's just face it, a lot of times people are rushing the footage. They're not giving it the kind of, buttery taste that's coming off of Brett and Jill and Mike's work. It just kind of drips class, right? Like, you feel it from the opening credits. And that's something that is really needed in this community, because the culture, right? The culture's changing. Everything's changing right now with this UAP stuff. And we have to kind of look at ourselves like, okay, this is the arbiters of history here, telling these stories here. We can't just rush this footage out and, throw it up, because now it's easy just to throw up a bunch of stuff. We can just, and that just was never the thing, right, with Brett. So when they found out what they were trying to do, me and this witness, Daryl, said, well, let's do this, right? We did our first doc, but the way they were explaining it was so different and so unique. And I could tell that it was really going to take its time telling all these people's stories. And there's probably a little bit of Bigfoot involved here, really. I mean, let's face it, Bigfoot kind of orchestrates its own thing. And I feel like there's this unseen hairy hand that's kind of guiding the story along.
Yeah, we feel that 100%. Absolutely. And we've said as much. It's really true.
Yeah, I got to tell you, I watched it last night. My wife was in the room. She's not a believer. She doesn't like me watching Bigfoot shows. You know, she does her own thing.
This is the
But
doc right here, Todd.
Here
that
you
we
are
gotta
right
do.
now.
I like
Yeah.
this.
she watched it,
Exactly.
and I watched her. You know, she's always on her phone, but I see her watching the TV more than not, and I'm like, okay, she's into this. It's the quality is there. It's not just some guy in a costume walking across a thing. You know, I mean, the way that the quality that you put into the film, Brett. I mean, the way you started off, the intros, the music, the scenery. I mean, it's just great. I mean, it's great for
Thank you.
everybody, you know. And
Mhm.
my wife, I think, enjoyed it. Even though she doesn't believe in Bigfoot, she really, I think, enjoyed the structure and the makeup of the whole documentary and the way it was put together. So, just in that sense, you don't have to be a Bigfoot believer to watch
Yeah.
the show, but
Mhm.
it's kind of cool. Even and it's really out there as far as the paranormal side goes, but you
Mhm.
guys touch bases on kind of all the different spectrums of the paranormal, I felt.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah.
from
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure.
the ball lightning or the spheres to, you know, everything else.
Mhm.
So, um, what's your guys' thoughts on the spheres? Do you think that's Bigfoot kind of in a different form roaming around? Do you think it's something else? I mean, Tobe, what's your thoughts on that?
It really was the first thing that changed my mind about what's going on with this. To say I was warned is probably too harsh of a way it was said. It's just like, oh, eventually you're going to see the lights when you're out bigfooting, and then you'll know. I'm like, well, if this can actually, if I can turn into Roy Neary and have UFO experiences, that's awesome too. Like, I'll gladly take UFO stuff on top of this Bigfoot stuff, and I'll be darned, So yeah, like these lights come in different forms, different shapes and sizes. The initial ones we saw were much bigger than what most people say they look like. We saw a huge display, like pyrotechnics exploding in Bigfoot areas at close range, and it was so big, so brilliant that it was my pilgrimage to take people up there that were skeptical about it, so they could experience it too and not waste their time with this relic hominid theory, because whatever was happening here with these lights was absolutely in prime Bigfoot habitat, to the point where my tent was moved 49 feet and stuck in a tree in the same area. We were finding giant footprints, scat with bones in it, disappearing tracks in the snow. But yet these lights it was all part of it. Everyone was talking about these lights. And th- that's just that's the biggest part for me for Bigfooters, is just like, can we just at least talk about these lights? Like, you don't have to tell me that they're connected. We don't have to believe Bigfoot's face is in every one of them, but they're there. And the same way that you're casting tracks and looking for hair, it's just so, it's just, I mean, their omission is a form of a lie, right? Like, they just don't talk about it. So that's when Brett told me that he had the likes of Dr. Simeon Hine, and I had no idea who this guy was, and that we had a placeholder and an anchor to talk about this from a scientific background and say, oh, thank God, this is actually kind of personal to me here. Like, let's catch up with where we're at. And again, it's so tied into this UFO conversation. What better time to talk about the orbs than now?
Brett, what's your thought on the orbs?
Man, that I don't know, and it changes all the time. I'm not sure whether they're spirits of Bigfoot, whether they're maybe they're excess energy that kind of comes together from the massive amount of energy that is kind of swirling around these occurrences. Um, I don't know. I have not seen an orb personally with my own eyes. I'm really anxious to. Hopefully this is my year. I think Simeon is onto something. I think, he's talking about ball lightning, and he's not necessarily saying that all of these orbs are ball lightning, but he's basically saying that it's the same type of, plasma type energy. One of the things I can tell you is that at a world premiere screening, we had a guy that works at a national laboratory in Tennessee who's a plasma scientist, and he works for the Department of Energy, and he came up and told us after the screening, he says, "You guys got all the science right."
Oh,
He's like,
wow.
"That's all I can say. It's classified. Everything else is classified." And I shouldn't say you guys.
Wow.
I should say Simeon Hine. I mean, this is these are his theories. This is his brainchild. But we have heard from other people that there's still some more components to it. And Simeon Hine's interview was 2 hours. I had to take 2 hours of him just going essentially nonstop on these theories and these ideas and condense it down to like 15 minutes. So it's very complex. I think these things can be intelligently controlled. Sometimes it doesn't seem like they are. It seems like they're just kind of just floating around. I will say, the other thing I'll say that's kind of controversial is there's a lot of people that think they're taking pictures of orbs at night, but they're not. They're taking pictures of raindrops or dust, and the flash is going off, and they're capturing things that look like orbs, but really what they're doing is they've got a fast shutter that's pausing things, and they're out of focus, and so they look like orbs. As a matter of fact, there's footage in our film that was given to us by someone who wanted to stay anonymous, of an orb in Indiana. And they have a spot, I don't even know where it is in Indiana. I think it's central, where they see orbs all the time, constantly. And this one is of a little, it's like purple, and it's like oscillating. And I mean, it's very clearly a plasma type, almost like an intelligent orb. So
Wow.
I don't know, man. I think they're amazing, but I don't really know what they are.
Well, you had the lady on your documentary talking about the orb that she saw that was kind of doing that pulsating. It was more
Yeah.
purple colored.
Yeah, it was
I
like a
wonder-
purple colored, and then we did some visual effects to kind of illustrate, as it moved through the trees, and how she was like, "Wow, this is neat, this is cool," and it started becoming attracted to her, and then she started feeling uncomfortable, and it moved away. So there's an obvious sign of some sort of intelligence. And then we actually had cell phone video that they took of this like pulsating, flashing red orb. And if you go through it almost like frame by frame, it's like you can almost at some points see like a mechanical structure that kind of changes within that orb. It's one of the weirdest pieces of footage I've ever seen. I mean, that particular one could be a UAP. I don't know.
Well, you talk about people taking pictures and seeing it's a raindrop or dust or whatever. Brian and I grew up in the 70s, where we had the Kodaks, was it, Brian, with the Insta picture? Every one of those things had like some kind of blurb or blob or something on them. So you never knew, like, I mean, flashing, all that stuff. But yeah, I mean, with today's technology and the pictures we're taking, and we're seeing those kind of things, I mean, what the hell is that? Something's out there. Something different's going on for sure, obviously.
No,
Let's
and
talk
these,
about go ahead, Tobe.
Well, I was just going to say, these orbs, they have an intelligence to them that is, when you see one of these, and if you get a video at the same time, great, or if you have a witness there with you, but you get a sense that there is this intelligence behind them, even though they seem almost like an earth puzzle or an earth energy. They seem natural in that state, like a tree or water or whatever. But there is this knowing that happens with this phenomenon. It's just like, oh, these things are alive. Like they're obviously following people at times. They're interacting. Like the orange and red ones seem to have more of a and the red ones seem to be more hostile, to be honest. The orange and red ones are very confrontational. Maybe that's a better word. As where the white ones seem to be more incidental and just kind of a one-off. When the colors come about, though, there seems to be more of a personality profile to these lights. So it gets out, it moves away quickly from the ball lightning foundation into this otherness of the phenomena. And then, of course, when you combine that with, oh, I saw an orb and now there's rock throwing. Oh, I saw this orb and now I see eye shine. These are the stories that just persist to say that there's this link between the phenomena.
Yeah, the rock throwing gets me in general because the only thing that can throw anything has to have hands. I mean,
Mhm.
are humans, right? Is there any other
Thumbs.
creature that
Yeah.
can
But
throw a
sometimes
rock
it's
besides us that we know of?
misdiagnosed too, and people think it's rock throwing, and it's a limb falling from the tree, you know, because it's dark, and we expect like some action's going to develop here, and we let our imagination get away from us. But when you have a rock hit the side of your car, or you have a rock hit your, you know, your chest or something like that, and these aren't big rocks generally. This is more of like an incidental warning, I guess, that things are about to go down.
Or maybe they throw an acorn or something like that, you know?
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I wanted to talk about, Brett, that just kind of intrigued me a little bit in the documentary was the knee impressions
Mm.
of those guys that you found that had the knee impressions. And I forget where that was at exactly, where they found those at.
That was Tobe. That was Tobe that found those.
Was
Yeah.
that you, Tobe? That
Yeah.
was you, Tobe. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Tobe, what happened with the hair samples?
Well, so we had the hair analyzed, and we had to get it out to Canada, actually, to a gal named Cindy Dosen, who works for as a, I don't know if she's a licensed veterinarian, but she has animal skills and kind of a bush vet. And she also was a volunteer out in the Olympic Peninsula for a Bigfoot operation called the Olympic Project out here. And so she's like one of these honorary members set in Canada. These guys happen to be my neighbors down the street here in the Olympic Peninsula in Washington. So we had to get hair to her. And but yeah, she did analyze those. She did a microscopic hair analysis. And so she just looked under a microscope and made her determination that they didn't belong in any data set that she had on file. They were, you know, she said a lot in that report, and I don't have it in front of me, but she did say something interesting. She did said, you know, these hairs are from an extremity in the last stages of resting growth. So I don't believe we told her exactly where we found these hairs. We might have said, well, they look like knee impressions. We don't know what they are. We still don't 100% know these are knee impressions, really. We're like 95, 98% sure that that's what they are, but we don't know if it is a knee, if it's one knee kind of pushing off right or left, you know, one knee going into the same substrate. But once she said that to us, and like so many cases, like Melskahan, right? As soon as we find Melskahan's the Yakima Native American in part 1, and I think he's our biggest download on YouTube, right, Brett? Right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah. It's just like 112,000 views or something.
So
It's great.
Mel is a good friend with my girlfriend, and she set me up with some interviews with him early to talk to him about Bigfoot. And he always said, if you find biologicals, just be cautious. So, you know, the Native Americans view taking home biologicals as there may be a consequence to it, including footprints, hair, anything biological connected to that. And that seemed to be the case, right? Is that as soon as we brought these knee impressions down to this place that we called the Al Moon Lab, it was just kind of the Pandora's box of the paranormal seemed to kind of open up. And you know, that's what this documentary is about, is this, you know, how much are you going to engage the phenomena? How far are you going to push it? Are you just going to have a sighting? Or are you going to let it dictate the next 20 years of your life, like it kind of has with me, right? Like I'm kind of your best and worst case scenario with what can happen to a Bigfooter, because I'm like so far down the rabbit hole. And I, you know, I want to be a good spokesperson at the same time with this here, but at the same time, I got to watch out for my own mental health, because this stuff is so addictive. Once you find out that this stuff is real, I mean, look at you guys. You're up here doing podcasts about cryptids, and I get it. It's just like it's an amazing struggle to balance our lives out with the responsibilities of it and then getting the shot.
Well, I will say that, and Brian may agree with me here, that getting into just the Bigfoot thing has opened our eyes to so much more in this
Oh,
whole
man, yeah.
spectrum of
We say it all the
everything.
time. We have more questions now than we did when we started this thing. You know, it's
Yeah, I mean,
wild.
I'm starting to wonder after watching the documentary. I started to wonder if Bigfoot isn't an alien. You know, I mean,
It's quite possible. Yeah.
we talk about, you guys cover so many spectrums in that thing, and I wanted to touch base on one thing, and I don't want to get too deep on it because I'm not too intelligent about it, but the coherent matter that the gentleman was discussing, and how these things can cloak, and how they're kind of maybe dimensional and everything. I mean, he's not wrong. There's so many possibilities out there that we're just not aware of, that we're just in our own world, and that's true, right? I mean, we're truly in our own world, and they're in a different world, but somehow we're connecting, or we're colliding, and I don't know why that is, but it just the thing that really gets me, and I don't mean to ramble on here, is these are primitive creatures, right? They're running around the woods chasing deer, but yet they've got paranormal capabilities. It's so strange to me.
It's a contradiction, isn't it? It really is a contradiction. I mean,
Yeah, that's what it seems.
yeah, Henry Franzoni, we posted this controversial, YouTube video of Henry Franzoni on our YouTube page last week. And he gets into all kinds of stuff. I highly encourage you guys to check it out. It may or may not be true. I don't know, but we do have corroboration. Some other folks that have said that it is indeed true what he has to say. But the point is that one of the things that he does say in that is he says that humans are better with mechanics and mechanical things, whereas big feet are better with the spiritual side of things, the paranormal, if you will, side of things. And Henry at one point calls them hillbilly scientists. He says that they are like creatures in all their glory, and that's what they love to do. But they are these physicists or these scientists. They understand how all this stuff works. They're kind of the keepers of the earth. So I don't know. I mean, it's just so hard to wrap your heads around what's going on, and I think throughout this process of doing these films, especially the Paranormal Bigfoot, I kind of put my feet in the shoes of those that have come before us and have looked up into the sky and have wondered what was going on. And you think about like something as simple as the sun that lights our day, and it's just like it's normal. We expect to see the sun when we go outside, or things lit up. But like ancient people, how would they have described the process, the nuclear process that was occurring within the sun, and the nuclear reaction that was causing it to glow and causing it to light our world? There's no way that they would ever have been able to have conceived of something like that. It would have been so far out of their construct. And I feel like, in today's day and age, we're right in the same spot. Like we just can't. I mean, we can to a certain extent, but it's very difficult for us to conceive of how these things could function. And like going back to what Tobe was saying earlier, I'm kind of rambling on, I apologize. But going back to what Tobe was saying earlier, a lot of what we're doing with these interviews and stuff like that are kind of a historical record. It's like the Sumerians or the Babylonians or whoever, when they talk about the sun god, or the Egyptians when they talk about Ra, thinking that the only explanation they can come up with is just it's a god. It's some sort of god that we need to worship because it brings us life. Now here we are, 5,000, 10,000 years later, and we're tripping on the same kind of stuff. It doesn't make sense to us. But now I kind of feel like science is slowly but surely starting to catch up, and some of these theories really align well, like with the inner dimensions, and like what Dr. Simeon Hine talks about with the coherent matter, and the fact that the universe is mostly dark matter, yet we can't see it. The fact that scientists know that human beings can only perceive 1% of the visible light spectrum. We're essentially blind to what the universe has out there. Once we start kind of wrapping our heads around it, it starts to sort of make sense, but we have a long ways to go.
Yeah, I agree totally. With that. I mean, I will say though, I feel that I've been a Bigfoot enthusiast all my life, but in the past 5-10 years and us getting more involved in doing the podcast, I feel like there's progress being made on what Bigfoot is, right? I mean,
Yeah.
we're kind of nailing down the fact that he's more than just, for the believers, obviously, and the knowers, I mean, he's more than just a natural creature out there. There's some kind of capabilities that these things have on the paranormal side, whether it be, cloaking or orbing or dimensional or whatever. And it kind of makes me think that sometimes maybe, God said, well, we're going to put man and see how he does with his intelligence, but yet he can't physically do the things that a Bigfoot could do. We're going to put Bigfoot out there and see how he does physically, but not give him the mental capability, but give him the paranormal ability to just, stay in his own world. I don't know. I mean, it drives me nuts trying to think about this stuff. And no, we'll never know.
yeah,
And no one really
sure.
ever knows. Do we? I mean, does anyone have it nailed down? No.
No. And I'll tell you guys something that'll trip you out. I don't know if Tobe knows about this or not. I think I told him, but I got an email last week. Again, I can't verify it, but this guy has been feeding us a bunch of different really, really interesting information. And the email last week, he was telling us about how he had a former roommate that this is back in like the 70s that worked on trains in like the Alaskan wilderness or something like that. It was somewhere in Montana or something like that. And they would occasionally hit a Bigfoot. And when they would go and remove the Bigfoot and take him away, it's going to sound nuts. Bigfoot had no bones. It was like a suit. There was no like structure to them when they were lifting them up and carrying them away. So his theory is that like their bones or the structure, whatever that made them be able to operate, were of like a different density or vibrated at a different frequency or something like that. So just to throw that out there, that's the first time I've ever heard that.
That would kind of make a little bit of sense, because like people say all the time, how come we've never seen a dead body in the woods or bones in the woods,
Yeah.
So that would make sense.
Yeah. Well, and the way they move, Brett, I mean, just the title of my girlfriend's YouTube video, Erin, who said it moved unnaturally, like it was made of water or something, right? Like you just
Liquid,
picture like the creature in an abyss, right? Just the real kind of snake-like serpentine quality of movement, how they glide, and unnatural movements is what I've heard over and over again. This thing was not natural. It didn't move naturally.
Yeah, a lot of people have told us that same thing.
And a lot of people talk about seeing them doing this like spider walk, which is creeper than I can tell you.
That's really the creepiest.
I love the Buc-ee's mug, by the way. I commented on the Buc-ee's mug last time.
Oh, thanks.
Sorry, Buc-ee's is like my favorite place in the world, man.
I love that place.
Oh, it's the
You guys
best.
got Buc-ee's out there?
No. It's whenever we travel out to like
whenever you get down south,
states,
right on,
like Texas and stuff. So I didn't mean to like totally go off.
No, you're fine. We love Buc-ee's, man.
That's all right.
I had a fanboy moment.
Shout out to Buc-ee's.
Looking for sponsorship.
That's right.
You got to get, you got to get a Buc-ee's sponsorship right here.
Oh, that would be amazing.
That'd be amazing. That'd be totally
Buc-ee's
amazing.
if you're listening.
That's right.
And they are. They are. If they just, hey, CIA agents that are listening to this right now, if you guys know anybody in the Buc-ee's organization, send them to the Cryptid Creatures folks.
Yes, sir.
Right, please. Yeah, please do.
Government officials who are in on this, please.
Yeah.
But let's Buc-ee this up.
Brought to you by Buc-ee's.
Wow.
I had to say, though, before we go on, Tobe,
amazing.
you have the best background and image going on there of all of us, man. I like that blue with that
Oh, this
you got behind
this
you.
is my homage to David Lynch, right? So I had to throw in a little Blue Velvet for people.
That is cool as hell. I really
Nice.
do like that.
Yeah,
man.
very Lynchian.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm just looking at my notes here.
All right, get back
I'll
to
edit this out. Don't worry about it. But let's talk about real quick the mind speaking. Let's go back to that real quick. The gentleman who talked about how he felt like the Bigfoot were mind speaking, or he said he knew the Bigfoot were mind speaking to him. What are you doing with a gun? You know, he had this gun in his pocket, and what are you doing with the gun? What do you guys think about that?
You know, when I first heard that story from Arla, when we first interviewed her, it gave me chills because of the fact that they were aware of the gun and aware of what a gun can do, damage that it can do to someone, and the fact that they were so concerned about her safety. I felt like that was deep. You know what I mean? Like that, like they knew and understood that the functionality of that weapon. And I find that really deep, which leads to a lot of other questions. You know, like how well do they really know us? How much are they really observing us?
Right.
When and how have they seen these guns in action? You know what I mean? So I knew that we had to tell that story because I think it really says a lot about their character. You know, and really, I mean, he could have been carrying a sword. It doesn't matter, you know, or as long as it was something that could have been used as a weapon. And I mean, it doesn't matter that it was a gun. It was just the fact that they knew that it was something that could be used to cause harm either to them or to Arla. And so that was a trip. You know, and Rick, man, that guy, he is so sincere. He is so earnest, you know, in his conversation. I mean, you know, I truly, truly believe that this actually happened. And the fact that Arla was right there with him as it was happening it's astounding when you really, really like think about that encounter. It's incredible.
That was actually one of my favorite ones in the movie. Was that?
Yeah.
Yeah, and he's former police officer, right, or law enforcement, right? So
He's former law enforcement. He's actually Rick he had a really interesting job. He was an inspector for I don't know if it was like he was technically law enforcement and he carried a firearm everywhere he went, but I think he actually worked for the fire department. He was an arson investigator. And so anytime he was on you know the side of the crime where the arson took place, he always was, you know, had to carry a firearm with him. And then he would go and he would testify on his findings and stuff like that. Yeah. But very analytical, you know what I mean? And very, you know, very much science minded, if you will, you know, through his occupation.
yeah, very sincere too when he spoke.
Big time.
I mean, you just felt confident what he was telling you was real, you know.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Definitely. I'd like to talk about the end of the show. I don't want to give too much away, but your ending encounter. I got to ask first of all, how did you come across these guys?
Yeah, that
was
was wild.
Yeah. So we found these guys at a screening in Bandit, Oregon, and this woman came up to us and told us the story. She briefly teased the story, and then she said, you know, can we set up a time to call where we have more time? Because there was a lot of people after this. This was after the screening of the first film, and there was a lot of people who wanted to talk, and we had limited time in the theater, and so we set up a call with her a week later, and she said, you know, listen, I talked to Harold, and Harold is open to talking to you guys. He's a little shy. He's not sure he wants to do it. And so she told us the story, and then about another week later, I gave Harold a phone call. And Harold was like, the guy is like, he's no BS guys. He owns a construction company. He's well known up and down the coast of Oregon. You know, he does a specialty. He does like foundation repair and some really unique construction type stuff. And he lives like 15 miles out in the woods. And so I called Harold and I said, look, you know, here's the deal. Here's the documentary that we made. And he's like, listen, you know, I'm really interested in doing this. he's like, I don't want to be doing interviews. I don't want to be doing podcasts. He's like, I'm going to check out your documentary. I'm going to have my family check out your documentary. And if it looks like it's a fit, then I'll do it. And he called me back a few days later and he's like, man, I got to tell you, I really enjoyed your documentary. My family all watched it. And they told me, they said, Dad, do it. If you're going to do it with these people, you know? So that was a huge compliment. And so, you know, we went down there to Coquille, Oregon, and went, you know, like I said, clear out into the country, and just had a chance to visit him and his property and get to know him and Cody. And I mean, that was just an amazing find. And he basically told us, he said right on camera, he's like, this is it. This is the only interview I ever intend to do on this, you know, and he's like, I don't really want to talk about it all that much, even though I think about it every single day. He's like, there's not a day that goes by that I don't think about it. How could I not think about it? He says, but people need to know that this is out there, that people need to know that this stuff is happening and that it's real. And I know what I saw, and Cody knows what he saw. And so we want to put it out there.
Yeah, man. I mean, I know he said he would never do a podcast, but we would love to get him on the show someday.
Yeah.
Maybe he'll change his mind. That
He might.
encounter, I don't want to spoil it. I want to leave it out there to the listeners and everybody to check out, because this is a great documentary. And before I go on, where can we view this, Brett? Where can they get this documentary at?
The best place to watch it right now is on Amazon. And it's like, you can rent it for $3.99 to watch it in HD, or you can watch it in standard definition for $2.99. It's going to be showing up on a couple of other platforms here, maybe in the next couple of months. Like, hopefully we get it on Tubi. I think it's going to be on iTunes, but for the most part right now, Amazon is the best place to check it out.
Okay. Yeah, it's definitely a great watch.
Thanks.
I mean, we bought it, so I'll just keep watching it from time to time, because you run out of documentaries and you're like, well, let me go back to the good ones and see what's going on there, you know.
We try to pack it in so, you know, it would take you a few times, you know, you might miss something the first time, or, you know, I think about that kind of stuff when I edit these things. Yeah.
So Tobe, what do you got going on nowadays? What's your next
well, so rather than
Paranormal Bigfoot world,
rather than plug anything I have going on, I really want to plug the YouTube channel overall, especially this latest interview with Henry Franzoni, because I really wouldn't have got into looking into the authentic side of Sasquatch without listening to this guy's voice. And if you don't know who Henry Franzoni is, he's in part 1 of A Flash of Beauty. And he's a scientist, and he has an interesting background with the Columbia River Gorge and Sasquatch. But he dropped some bombs. And I had a feeling he'd been holding out for the last 20 years. I had no idea to the degree this guy may have been holding out. What he says is so contrary to, I mean, it's so red pill from the opening frame to the end that it just blows up the matrix of what possibly could be going on with Bigfoot. Is it all real? You be the judge. Go check out part 1 and 2 of Henry dropping bombs on A Flash of Beauty on YouTube.
Okay. Sounds great. We'll do that for sure. And the listeners will too.
Yeah, it's wild, you guys. It's wild.
Brett, did you give us any inkling about what you might have going on in the future? If you have another one coming out, what it might be about? Are you going to stay in the Bigfoot scene? Are you going to go to the Dogman scene? What are you thinking there, brother?
Well, yeah, I can't talk too much about it, but we might be venturing off into a little bit of Dogman stuff. Don't know much more about that. You know, Dogman for me is difficult. It's difficult to wrap my brain around. And yeah, I've heard the stories about them being government agents, and I'm starting to think that that's probably what's going on. We have a thing that you guys, I think I talked about this the last time I was on the show. We have a thing here in Oregon and Washington called the Klickitat Ape Cat. And I actually had one of the stickers that this is like all backwards.
Yeah, we did talk about that.
Yeah, we talked about the Klickitat Ape Cat, this big giant cat. And there's this guy named James Shupsky, and he's got a store up in Bingen, Washington, where he takes paranormal reports. And he gets, like, on average, one a day. and he's had a ton. He just got another report about the Klickitat 8 cat, not more than I think just a few days ago.
Wow.
So that might be coming up. I mean, man, we have so many stories to tell. It's crazy.
Oh yeah, no kidding.
But our concentration right now is on Voices in the Wilderness and
Yeah,
giving the
I'm
Sierra
excited about that one.
sounds their due. Yeah. And this is like all of these films, we try and put as much quality into them as we can so we can just really keep pushing towards the mainstream, trying to break out. So we can kind of start silencing the giggles. You know what I mean? And the UAP community is starting to be taken serious. I think Bigfoot's got a little ways to go, but I think the Sierra sounds are going to do a lot of good for folks out there taking this in the mainstream, taking this thing seriously. Because these guys that recorded these sounds, you know, Ron Moorhead obviously is no nonsense,
Right.
but the other guys that he went up there with that are still alive that we've had a chance to interview, such as Bill McDowell and Lewis Johnson, those guys are tough cowboys, man. They're not making this stuff up, you know. And the other stuff that they have to say, the other stories they have to tell, I think you're going to blow people away.
So you got to interview the guys that were with Ron Moorhead when he recorded, some of the guys that were up there.
Yeah, they've never spoken on camera before.
Amazing.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So do you have a timeline for the
2025 probably. We have a lot of work to do. We're hoping to get up to the camp when the 25 feet of snow melts at some point. It's going to just keep coming. I know it. So that'll probably be in September, and then we'll have to edit it. So it's still a ways out, but we're working on it.
Wow, he's actually going to take you up there, huh?
I think so.
Yes.
I mean, one of the relatives of the Johnsons, David Johnson, will probably be taking us up there. Yeah, Ron's living in North Carolina right now, so I don't.
Right.
He might come up. He might. We'll see.
We had Ron on about a year ago, I think, and
Cool.
saw him
Been a while.
last year at the Cryptid Con at Lexington, Kentucky. I
Mhm.
think. So
Yeah.
he's a great dude, man. He really is.
Great
And he's
dude.
he's
Yeah,
down
he
to
is.
earth, but he's for real. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to get his new book, Quantum Bigfoot.
Oh, yeah. You got to read that. I mean, a huge inspiration for a Flash of Beauty Paranormal Bigfoot.
Yeah,
For sure.
definitely. I want to thank you guys, Tobe, Brett, for being on tonight. We appreciate it.
You're welcome.
A Flash of Beauty, Paranormal Bigfoot is the documentary, the second installment of hopefully many more. You got to
Hopefully.
keep throwing those out there and keeping us entertained for sure. I mean, top of the line guys for sure.
Thank you.
And always looking forward to more. Tobe, it's great having you on tonight. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Appreciate you being here, and maybe
Yeah.
we can talk to you
Yeah,
again
dude, it was
sometime
awesome.
soon.
Mm-hmm.
Brett, we're waiting for the next installment and get you back on for that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
let us know when it comes out so we can get you back on here.
100%, you guys. 100%. Yeah. Looking forward to
always
coming
fun.
back.
All right, when we finally make it out there, we'll connect with you guys and hang
Please
out
do.
sometime, have a beer or something.
Yeah. Please do.
Oh yeah, for sure.
All right,
Love it
You
guys.
guys
there.
take care.
You too, brothers. Thank you.
too.
Bye-bye.
Thanks
See ya.
again.
See ya.
Bye-bye.